Welcome to the Women in Industry podcast. My name is Kirsty Davies-Chinnock, and today we're joined by Katherine Evans, who is a Geotechnical Manager at Tarmac. Tarmac are the UK's leading sustainable construction material, road contracting and building products business, and they supply construction material comprising of aggregates, asphalt, cement, lime, concrete, etc. I know absolutely nothing about geology, so welcome, Katherine, and why geology?
Hello. My teacher in school, when I started in year 7, I asked my teacher, who was my geography teacher, why have you got a box of rocks on your windowsill, Mrs. Tanner? And she said, stay for sixth form and I'll teach you geology. So I did. 5 years later. Yeah, just really liked it. It's just, it was really, I guess, changed everything that I'd ever learnt. What you were doing growing up. And then just these crazy concepts of time and how a rock, which to me was just a thing, was actually once something else that over millions of years turned into something else, and now I'm holding a piece of history. That's what did it for me.
I think it's something that you just don't think about, do you? As you said, you know, a rock is just there, it's just a rock. And you've looked at geology in sort of lots of different ways, from what I can tell, from stalking your LinkedIn profile. And you've had several roles. You know, you've been a geologist, both offshore as a mudding geologist, and you've also been an exploration geologist. So I have to ask, what does a mudding geologist do compared to a mining geologist or a pit geologist?
So a mud logger. That you
Okay.
mean the mud logging geologist. You collect a sample, and that's about it.
Oh, I thought it was going to be much more exciting.
Well, it can be. It can be. If you're a geologist and a massive nerd, then it is really exciting because you go to these huge vibrating boxes, which are called shakers, imaginatively called a shaker, and there's mud coming over it, and the mud is lubricating the bit, and it's coming like going all the way down the annulus to get into the bit, which could be kilometres long. And it was in the North Sea, so it was, and twisty and windy. And then as it's cutting at the bit, in the, well, not the cold face, but that's where it is right at the end, it's washing all of the pieces of rock that it's cutting back up the outside, and they then come over. When it gets to the top, they would come over, so there's a bit of a lag time in between actually drilling it and it coming back to the surface. But then I'd go along with my sieve and I'd catch some mud, and there'd be tiny chippings in it, and I'd put it in a bag, wash it, I'd take it back to my tiny little unit that was like sitting in the middle of the North Sea, and then I'd look at it down a microscope and work out what it was. So we could like keep a graph, like a chart going, so we knew where we were in between all the horizons, to work out where the gas or the oil was and when we could expect it, and when I had to go and wake up the well site geologist, which I only did once and I was wrong anyway. So, but he was very nice, he wasn't cross.
So you say you're in the middle of the North Sea.
Yeah.
Were you on ships? Were you on the oil rigs or?
I was on a jack-up rig, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And how long were you on that for?
I was going back and forth the same one, this little rust bucket called the Noble Al White, which doesn't exist anymore because they scrapped it. It was so bad. I would go back and forth. It was 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, so you did a week of nights, and then you'd have this awful shift around day where you'd work like 3/4 of the night to get to sleep a couple of hours, and then you'd switch to days. Oh, and that would mess everything up. And then you do a week of days, hope that you wouldn't get fogged off and the chopper was actually coming, and then you get to go home and travel all the way back over the Netherlands to get back home, and then do it all again.
And how long did you do that for? Because it
I,
does sound hard work.
yeah, it was a year. I did it for a year.
Oh, I take it all back. Modern geologist does sound really interesting. um, I do like your title you have of exploration geologist. And you were in Canada. So what were you exploring in Canada?
Coal. Coal, but you're going to be really bored of this as well because this isn't interesting either. It sounds interesting, but it's not. No, I'm supposed to be selling this, and I thought it's a great, great career. It's, if you like that sort of thing, and
If you
at the
like
time we
rocks.
did, yeah, I did really enjoy it at the time. Um, was to go and sit next to a rig, and the actual proper exploration team, they had gators and they would go off into the middle of nowhere. I'd be really worried about like forest fires and stuff because they would just go off absolutely nowhere, and they'd have a sat nav because it's just immense Canada. You wouldn't just can't imagine the difference. Like you drive up a road that nobody's driven up for weeks and weeks, and you may never see somebody there for I don't know a month or so again. So you have to be really careful with that. But my side of it was I would just go around the pit that I worked in, the open cast, and we were drilling holes then down to make sure we knew what was coming up in our extensions. So it could be like years into the future, or we were looking at a satellite mine that was a couple of kilometres into the bush somewhere. But it is just you sit next to the rig, you wait for the core to come up, then you put it in boxes, you look at the core and you have to do lots of different logging, you work out what it is, and it's the same thing. Then you work a chart out, you work out where everything is, you work the thicknesses of the coal out, so you pick the top and the bottom and if you had any interburden, and just sit there and hope the porcupine walk past and you got to see something interesting.
I imagine like other minerals, you get a variety of quality in the coal seams and things like that. Is that the sort of thing that you'd measure as well while you were doing your testing?
Yeah, so you would take a big chunk of it usually, or you might take all of it, put it in a bag and send it off, and that would go and be tested then to work out the kind of yield you'd expect as it went through the plant, or what type of coal it was, because it was different coal there to what we have over here. It wasn't like the anthracite that we get. So you'd have stuff for coking coal for making steel, and then this stuff, the PCI, which was like the pulverized coal injection, which wasn't as good grade, but they needed to make sure they weren't selling them mixed, so it had to be separated at some point. So that was quite interesting when you see the different types of coal and you start getting really good at it, and you could just look at it and tell what it is because of the colour or the shininess, and start guessing how much of a little competition between you and your buddy then, what they think the percentage is of like rubbishy coal to really good coal. Oh, the stuff we did, what a laugh.
Well, it's experience. I mean, I'm in stainless steel, as you know, and we always know we've got, a long-term employee when within a few weeks of them starting, they come in and go, oh, I was walking through so-and-so and I saw this finish and I thought, I bet we polished that. And we're like, yeah, okay. I'll mark it down to remember to celebrate your 10th anniversary. You're fine. But everything you've told me there about the North Sea and open cast pits in Canada, it sounds hot and heavy and potentially quite dangerous. And I know from your LinkedIn posts, you are a massive advocate, a huge voice for changing the design of PPE. So it's not just a smaller version of men's PPE for women, but it's actually designed proactively for women. What's the worst issue you've had with badly designed PPE?
I think it was probably when I was going to work offshore, we had to have dry suits because if a chopper came down in the North Sea, depending on how chunky you were, you had about 30 minutes. I think that's what they told us.
Okay,
So,
that's not
yeah.
scary at all.
No, but you had to have a dry suit on that was tight around your neck, tight around the wrists, and the shoes were already built in. And mine never ever fit because I was so much smaller. It was the Dutch sector. The fellas were big, They were tall, they were like Vikings, and then there was me who was 5'2", and everything always gaped. So should we have come down, that would have filled with water and I would have been done. I think that's probably the most extreme that we've had. Otherwise, it's always been like, I can't do my job because I can't use these gloves because they're sticking this far off my finger, or this PPE is not letting me bend down. I couldn't go out on site because we didn't have maternity PPE when I had my first son. So I kept on going until my vest wouldn't do up on my belly. I was like, that's the end of that then. I don't really know what to do after that. Get some men's clothes, because that's what they used to do. They just have men's clothes and make do. Now you can actually get maternity PPE, because why would you not? What else? I think boots. Oh, boots. Yeah, boots.
I'm with you on boots.
Yeah, tripping over in boots, wondering why can't I walk normally? Why am I getting pelvis ache? Why can't I feel the tips of my toes? Yeah, you're starting to get numbness in places because your body is having to react a different way, because your feet they're not in shoes that are supporting your shape and your weight and your centre of gravity, so it's forcing you to stand a funny way. So you start getting like knee pain and thigh pain and pelvic pain, and after you've just come back after having a baby, you know all about that, the pelvic pain.
I have quite small feet. You probably do at 5'2", so I'm like a 3.5 to a 4, which over the last 30 odd years, I think probably about 25 years ago, I got my first proper pair of women's PPE footwear that were a size 5, because they didn't go any smaller.
Oh.
And they were more like a size 6 or a 7.
Yeah.
I think my favourite story, I was going on site and I said, shall I bring my PPE? And they were like, no. It has to be certain, kite mark, safeguarded. We will provide everything when you get here. And I was like, okay. So I get to site in London and they said, what size are you? And I said, size 4. And the smallest pair of shoes they got was size 6. And I had to climb scaffolding
My God.
boots 2 sizes too big.
Oh.
Ouch.
Yeah.
Which is not, I mean, it's completely comparable to potentially drowning in the North Sea when you look at it, slipping down a couple of foot.
If you slipped and hit your head though, yes.
Well, yes. I hit my head all the time. So, because of your advocacy on having safely designed PPE for women, last year you started Bold as Brass, and you're looking to change industry culture through offering up ways out of a sort of stagnating status quo of a gendered industry. I mean, we know we've got skill shortages in every industry in the UK, and we need to be maximising the people we can to get into those roles. So changing that is a brilliant idea. Tell me more about that and what it is you're doing.
In the beginning, I set up, and it was just to bring the women together of South Wales and the Southwest, because I'd met a lot of women and they were all individuals in the companies that they worked for, and I realised that each of us were going through exactly the same things, but because we were so far apart, didn't realise that these things this happen all the time, and they felt like it was just happening to them, and maybe it was them, they were the reason why, they were some sort of bad person, because these things just seemed to happen to them and only them. When then we set it up and we had a support call, we just all spoke one Thursday afternoon, I think there's about 17 of us on the call, realised quickly that these things are very generic, and had a thought then from one of them, Jess, said, I'd really like to do something about PPE, because PPE really holds us back. And we thought, yeah, that's a really good idea, because it really is rubbish. So just started putting some posts on LinkedIn, and I got a lot of traction. People wanted to be involved, they want to make it better, because it does it does better for their business, and it does better for big business if women are able to come to work and carry out their jobs to the best of their ability, because that diversity drives innovation, and then the big businesses do more business. So being able to actually do your jobs because you're not being held back by a glove that's 2 sizes too big anymore is not revolutionary, but it seems to have taken us a long time to get there. But then alongside that, we started this year to do empowerment sessions, which have gone really, really well, where we are organising with really lovely volunteers, coaches, who just give us an hour. They put so much effort into it beforehand just because they know what it's like to feel that way. A lot of them were engineers at some point, or they've worked in the industry at some point, and they know how hard it is for women to actually get themselves up, because you're just fighting this boys' club all the time. And yes, the industry has to change around us completely, but if women feel that they've got a voice, and I think that's the thing about Boulders Brass, is that the voice is backed by all the women in the group, and we've got now 610, I think, women in the group. That's a big army of women who are backing your voice. And then we have our allies, we have 220 odd allies. That's a big voice as well, to make sure that what we're saying isn't just women talking about women, it's men talking about things that are being faced by women, because it's them who have the ability to change it, because these are the people who are leading these businesses. There's still not enough women at the top. So that's what we want to do, is to see more representation going up, empower women to actually be the change they want to see, and make everybody aware that they have got a part to play in this, and it shouldn't just be left to women to sort out by themselves.
I agree completely, and it sounds like a fantastic initiative. And to have a tribe of nearly 1,000 women and allies in 12 months, it just shows how important it is to everybody involved. And it makes a good commercial sense for companies to do this, because they're going to have better diversity of employees. That's going to promote innovation, as you said. It's also going to make people more inclined to deal with them, because they're going to come across much better. But they can only do that if you, as the employees, have the right tools to do it. One of the things that I know somebody, and they wear a harness for work, and they've really struggled getting a harness to fit, because women have more hips than men.
Yeah.
And to get it to fit her hips, it's too big everywhere else, so it's not safe for her to use.
Yeah.
And it's really quite difficult. She was quite lucky, probably about 15 years ago, that her employer actually got one bespoke for her. But you know, it's one of those things that when she needed it replaced, it's like, well, it was really expensive last time. It's like, there's a reason for that.
Yeah.
But one of the things that this will also do, I think, is point these issues out to the people who can change them. Have you had much engagement from PPE companies looking at changing the design?
Yes. Yeah.
Excellent.
Not yet about harnesses, because Claire Lundy did bring that up last week, that there's an issue with harnesses, but also chainsaw trousers. One of my friends, Ursula Jones, has said she can only get them if they're in crazy colours from one company, and she doesn't really want bright pink or bright purple, or there's even like a really bright blue. Can they just be the same as the men's?
Well, those aren't high-vis colours anyway, they're just bright.
Yeah, and they don't cover all the patches for high vis anyway. So because she works as she's like a Gower warden, I think, so she doesn't need them to be high vis. But at the moment they're not really good for much, and it's not hard to just make things the same as the men's. Don't pink them up. we don't all want pink. I'm really fighting the pink stereotype anyway, but thanks for that little bit of extra pink on there. Yeah, we are from Pulsar and Blockladder, Leo, V12 and Rockfall. They've all been really, really good. Bodyguard, they really want to get involved as well. What else we've got? Skulls and gloves. Yes, there's been a few glove companies. Oh, wait, fly! There's been a few glove companies who have sent us lots of gloves to try, which have been great because gloves is so simple to get. Just stocking size 6 and 7 gloves on site rather than the usual 9s and 10s. So I was at a site a month ago. I lost one of my size 6 gloves and then they passed me another glove and they're like, I haven't got sizes, it's just a size 10. It's like, well, this isn't even going to stay on my hands, it's just going to drop off, so I took it off. And then found a size 8 in the back of the truck and turned it inside out so it would fit like the right hand. It's just like, why would you not have sized gloves? What? This is just bonkers. You clearly don't want people using their hands, or you're not bothered if they take their gloves off to do a bit of work.
It's frightening, and it's so easy with gloves that are the wrong size to lose a finger, the very thing they're meant to be there to protect, just for things getting trapped. So yeah, we found a really good glove company a few years ago, and I can't remember who, that do loads of different sizes, and it was the first time, probably after 30 years, that I was like, these gloves actually fit me. Because I'd be like, no, everybody must wear PP, and I'd go, well, if I'm doing that, I can't wear gloves. Because if I'm putting a profile in a machine, it's going to catch the gloves and it'd go underneath. I'll just use bare hands. But I wouldn't, I can't lead by example that way by doing that, because, you know, we say to people, we want to protect you. We want you to wear the right PPE. Just ignore Kirsty over there breaking the rules. You just can't do it.
No.
So, where do you hope to take Boulders Brass?
I have been thinking recently about that very thing, and it was something that was asked me last week. I would like to see us having I can never remember the word, but it's like the stamp of approval on PPE to show that it's been trialled, tested, it passes our stamp, passes our grade of it's useful, we can wear it, the shapes fit. I want to see it tried out by people of lots of different backgrounds. So it's not just PPE for Caucasian people who are able-bodied, because this is something that's still not seen, I think, is that, that part. And I'd like to be able to have a similar accreditation for companies, and that they have a Boulders Brass approval as being a company of choice for women, because there's plenty of people out there at the moment virtue signalling, and you don't find out till you get there that actually it's a crock of crap. So I would like to be able to do that. It's going to take a lot, I think, but we'll get there. We need to set ourselves up as a CIC for sure, so we can apply for some funding, because at the moment everything's just run off my own steam and my spare time, which is getting less and less. But I do have some really, really wonderful women who I fall back on a lot, and have said that, can you take it more regionally now for me, because I just can't be everywhere anyway, but I would like us to have a better voice in places that aren't South Wales and the South West.
Now, that sounds absolutely fantastic. And I know for me, if there was a choice between Company A and Company B, and Company A is generic and Company B is being accredited by Boulders Brass, that's where I'm spending my money. It's that simple. It's going to fit me, it's going to keep me safe.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm not going to be slipping down the scaffolding when I'm on site, you know, going to inspect something. It's hugely important, and you're doing a brilliant job. You're obviously giving Boulders Brass a lot of value, and the women in those industries that you've spoken about, and and who are involved. What value do you get from the role? What does it do for you?
It's helping me achieve my values, especially my value of usefulness, because I think there's been times in my life where I felt really glum and not been able to work out what it is that's making me feel so useless. And when I've got a brother who is a nurse saving lives, a sister-in-law who's a midwife bringing lives into the world and saving lives, and then I was thinking, I deal with rocks, how very useful. So this is, I've worked out what my values are, and the usefulness one of being useful to women up and down the country and even outside the country, because we have members who are all around the world. That makes me it makes me feel valued, especially when I get little messages back from them saying thank you for everything you're doing. I've managed to achieve this, this and this, and I think that makes it worthwhile, because now she can go on to do so much more. I've never met her before, but just imagine what it's doing for her self-esteem, and I think that's what it is. It's just that feeling of being valued, reaching my personal values, and hopefully making other people see that they can do the same. If they speak out, yeah, it's hard to challenge sometimes, but there's people behind you. There's always people behind you, and I will be there behind them as well.
I think it's difficult when you're battling against the status quo that it's always been that way, it's always been that way. It doesn't need to be, because there's only 1 in 100, open cast pits are women, so you don't need the same PE. Well, you do, because you're still doing the same job. There are only so many women forklift truck drivers or polishing operators or welders. We still need to be able to do the job and be protected. But if we are, and we're not battling the microaggression of taking longer to do our job, so because of badly fitting PPE, then more women are going to come into the industry, and it's going to be a better environment for them as well. So I think you're really, really doing a great job at flipping the bird. I really do.
Thanks.
So, one final question, Katherine, because I could talk about PPE and rocks all day. What's the best advice you've ever been given?
This is from my friend Miles Kinniston. He said, if it moves and it's not supposed to, duct tape. If it's supposed to move and it doesn't, WD-40. You're set for life. I was like, thank you, Miles. It's probably not the answer you were looking for, but that's the best piece of advice I've ever had.
I'm a back of a fag packet engineer, trust me. I've lived by those rules for 34 years. Thank you so much for coming on. I really, really appreciate it. And we wish you and Boulders Brass every momentum and success going forwards.
Thank you very much.